All right, welcome back. I have a feeling, I haven't looked at these slides, but I have a feeling these slides are going to be basically stuff that I've already talked about with saturated fats, but hey, it doesn't hurt to do it again. All right, so the difference between margarine and butter. All right, butter is a saturated fatty acid. Okay, how do we know it's saturated? Think of butter. Is that a solid or a liquid? It's a solid. So guess what? We're saturated. Other fatty acid chains, they can stack on top of each other. So when you get the stacking, because of saturation, it's a solid. All right. So this is an example of butter. How many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. 17 carbons. Okay. So this is not a medium chain triglyceride. This is a pretty long chain. Okay. So a diet rich in saturated fatty acids is widely considered to be unhealthy. You know, guys, I've really been learning a lot in the past years about these high fat, high protein diets, and I'm actually a believer in them. There's tons of research that's coming out that's proving that those diets are actually pretty good. Like the paleo diet. I imagine a lot of you have heard of that. If you haven't heard of the paleo diet, what it basically is it's a diet that our ancestors used to eat when our ancestors were cavemen in the Paleolithic time period. All right, the Paleolithic time period is when we were hunters and gatherers, and we basically ate meat, all right, animals and seeds and nuts, and probably a very small amount of fruit. Definitely a lot of vegetable matter, but that was pretty much it. That's what our diet was composed of, and pretty much zero carbohydrate. There were no breads when we were hunter and gatherers. There is no bread at all. Zero starches at all. Okay, there might have been potato-like um, foods, like the high starchy foods, but probably not many. Okay, so what the theory was is that if it was good enough for our ancestors, because look what our ancestors all turned into, they turned into us. So obviously their diets were pretty good, and having these diets really rich in fat and proteins helped all develop our brains. So that's kind of what the philosophy is. There's also other things with the government and things like that, where the government was paid off by like the wheat industry in order to emphasize more of a carbohydrate diet. You know, if you want to believe that, you can believe that, you know. But as far as historically and how our ancestors grew up, that's kind of what the paleo diet is, where they're saying that fats are not bad for you. It's the carbohydrate that's bad for you. Because a few thousand years ago, we became farmers. We got tired of hunting and gathering, and we decided to become farmers. So we said, rather than going out and finding our food, let's bring our food into us. Let's create cages and farms and grow animals. We understand how animals reproduce. You know, if I have, you know, a handful of animals, I can keep making animals for the rest of my life, and I got food for the rest of my life. I don't have to keep going and hunting them. And instead of finding berries, why don't I just take them and plant them? Take the seeds. I kind of understand how that works. If I plant the seeds, I can grow our vegetables. So that's kind of when wheat started becoming in our diets, and milk as well. Milk was kind of not something in the Paleolithic time, but it definitely was when we started agriculture, because we had these animals and we, you know, found out that, hey, they have milk. Why don't we milk the animals and drink the milk? So these are kind of more newer types of foods, which is what our modern diet is all about. So prehistoric man, paleo man did not eat wheat. So are we supposed to eat all these high rich carbohydrate foods? I mean, if you look at our health, I mean, what, 1 in 3 people have diabetes. One in what, like 2 in 3 people are overweight. Again, this isn't a class about nutrition, but it's kind of showing how the chemistry works. In all these years, we've been told that the saturated fats are bad, but we're actually finding they actually are not bad. It's actually what our diets used to be composed of when we were, like 5 to 10,000 years ago. All right. So, anyways, sorry I went off on that tangent. It's kind of an interesting philosophical discussion that I like to have. I'm pretty into nutrition, so I find it interesting. Plus, I know the chemistry of it. So, knowing more of it just helps me understand it a lot better. So anyways, so that's why I saw the statement and I had issues with the statement. It's like we're starting to see that these are not that unhealthy for you. Okay, here's another thing. This is actually a chemistry thing, so this is kind of related to what we're talking about. Okay, cholesterol and triglycerides. If you have very high cholesterol, triglycerides inside your body, how do you think we can get rid of them? Do you think we get rid of them with water-soluble carbohydrates? Or do you think we can get rid of fats and oils with other non-polar fats and oils? Right? Like if our liver has a lot of fat around it, how do you think we can get rid of that fat? Well, you get rid of it by putting something in there that's soluble, that the fat is soluble in. So a lot of this, a lot of people say, it's interesting, I'm eating all this fat and I'm lowering my cholesterol and triglycerides. Well, on the chemistry point of view, well, that totally makes sense. If you want to dissolve fat, you got to use fat. All right, don't use water-soluble carbohydrates. Carbohydrate has a bunch of OHs all over it. That's not going to dissolve your fat. All right, so if you think about that, chemistry-wise, hey, that kind of makes sense now. All right, so the Atkins diet, the paleo diet, the ketogenic diet, these all things kind of make sense when you think about chemistry. Okay, so scientists have attempted to produce alternative versions of butter, which is called margarine, with a similar taste, but they aren't as saturated. They are unsaturated, but again, we're having issues with that. Most naturally occurring unsaturated fatty acids are liquids, like all of the vegetable oils. Those are naturally occurring unsaturated. Okay, most of the desired butter alternatives, we need compounds to be solids, partially hydrogenated. So imagine you have a long chain molecule that has multiple double bonds in it, and you just hydrogenate off one of them. So you just hydrogenate that. All right, that alters the chemistry of it. Okay, so the process allows only for a few carbon double bonds to remain on the chain, making the solid fatty acid, that is not naturally occurring. Okay, and that's also part of the paleo diet. It's like, well, enough with the processed food. Why are we eating processed food? I honestly think a good diet, again, I'm going back to there. I don't want you to think I think that all you should be eating is a pound of lard every day. What we should be eating is food that comes from the earth, as close of the earth as possible. We should not, they always say that you should be shopping the outer rim of a supermarket. All right, that's where you need to buy your food, the outer rim of a supermarket, all the way around. So at one end of so as soon as you walk in a supermarket, you have your fruits and all the vegetables. Then if you go on the end, you have all your meats. And then if you go on the other end of the store, you've got your eggs and your dairy. Okay, now you also have the bakery, unfortunately, on the rim. Well, you just kind of skip the bakery. Okay, so anyways, any food in the middle of the aisles, that's all of the processed foods. That's everything in boxes, anything that's been processed so much. Okay, so there you go. There's my take on health. All right, here's the chemistry of unsaturated vegetable oils. Okay, notice they are cis double bonds. Okay, they are oils because they have the kinks in it. Okay, remember I was talking about the omegas. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So this is an omega 9, 12. So I can 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm sorry. You start counting from this end. That's right. You start counting from this end. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So this is an omega 6, 9 oil, or omega 6, omega 9. Omega-6 and 9s are common. Why are they common? Because they are in vegetable oils. Okay. So now, if you were to take this vegetable oil and partially hydrogenate it, we learned about how to hydrogenate, and you hydrogenate off one of the bonds and form an omega-9. That's what margarine is. Okay, so there you go. That's the partially hydrogenated oils. Some partially hydrogenation leave trans double bonds. Okay, that sometimes happens. Let me see if we see those. Yeah. Okay, sometimes in the hydrogenation process, this cis turns into a trans. So the hydrogen comes down here. Let me get my pen. The hydrogen comes down here, and then this gigantic R group ends up over there, and you end up with a trans fatty acid. Those are pretty bad for you. Okay, those are not good. All right, so some partially hydrogenated leave trans double bonds. Trans fatty acids have a similar shape to saturated fatty acids. So trans fats and oils are very similar to saturated fats, okay, like lard and things like that. All right, trans fats are widely considered to be just as unhealthy as saturated because they have a similar structure. Nutritionists agree that the healthy diet consists of very few saturated trans fats. Well, like I said, guys, it really depends on if you believe in the paleo diet or not. And I kind of am a believer in paleo and the ketogenic diet. Well, all right. I don't want to give you my opinion. Well, this is the opinion of the author, well, of a nutritionist. So again, I guess what the point I'm trying to make is you kind of have to educate yourself, okay? All right, so focus, so margarine and butter. So here you see a trans double bond, okay, compared to a saturated. You can see that they are similar in shapes. All right, so I hope I did not go too far off my tangent. It's just kind of just to think about. I feel like we've kind of made our diets very complicated these days, and it's really not that complicated, So that's 3.7. When we come back, we'll talk about 3.8, which is polymers, which is a huge type of molecule in our everyday lives.